everyone. This is your host, Maheen, and we're here with another episode of the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast, where each session of the show focuses on key issues that impact us all, and today is no exception, as we'll explore the intersection of climate risk and financial strategy. Joining us today is Ron Dembo, the visionary founder and CEO of Riskthinking.AI. With a legacy of innovation spanning over 3 decades, Ron has revolutionized risk management frameworks from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. After a distinguished career that includes founding Algorithmics Incorporated and advising some of the world's leading financial institutions, Ron now leads the charge in equipping global markets with the tools necessary to access and respond to climate-induced financial risks. Let's welcome Ron and delve into how he's using groundbreaking technology to redefine risk management for the era of climate change. Good afternoon, Ron, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. How are you today?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for the invitation.
It's truly a privilege to have you here sharing your groundbreaking work on blending technology with the risk management, and we are quite eager to learn from your extensive experience and insights. Now, let's begin by discussing or starting with the origins of riskthinking.ai, because Ron, every great innovation starts with a story. Could you please share with us what inspired you to start riskthinking.ai and the journey from concept to launch?
So when I sold my former company, Algorithmics, I was driven mainly by my love of the world, basically, to make a significant impact. And my passion was really climate change. I'd actually followed climate for a long time. I was a tree hugger, probably because of my dad. He used to take me to the game reserve 5 times a year, and I would sit out in the wild with him listening to animals. So anyway, I founded Zero Footprint, a company, but at that time, this was really early days. But still, we secured something like 250 clients, including an exclusive with Air Canada. But despite all of our success, I realized that we needed more dramatic change. Things were not moving fast enough. It was a real struggle to get companies to reduce their carbon footprint. So without financial markets incorporating climate risk, some substantial progress would be pretty much impossible. Our markets are mispriced we don't price in the risk of climate. And I'll give some examples of that later. So this insight led me to start Riskthinking, aiming to integrate everything I knew about climate risk, financial analysis, and so on, to create meaningful change. And it also brought together my academic career at Yale, which was in AI, computer science, and algorithms. So a nice mixture.
That's amazing. That's good to know. I mean, it's so fascinating to see how your experiences have really propelled you to address such critical global challenges. But to build onto this a bit more, Ron, how did your past experiences shape the vision for this new venture?
So one of the things I like doing is solving big problems. And one of the most important things I've learned is that it's possible to make an enormous impact, starting with only a few of the right people who share your vision. So 3 people in a garage in Toronto can change the world. I'm actually inspired by Steve Jobs, who, really showed us the way. Algorithmics started in my living room just with me. And using my consulting revenue, I hired 2 or 3 people. I had no funds. It was very hard to raise funds in those days. I remember going to a bank and them saying, well, what are the assets you own? So I said, these are assets that are in our heads. But anyway, it started with a few students and ended being the largest supplier of worldwide enterprise climate risk systems in the world. So it's possible.
It is. It is. I mean, let's try to also understand the climate as financial risk, right? I mean, shifting perspectives on risk management are really transforming the way people or businesses anticipate and mitigate emerging multifaceted risk in our interconnected world now. But Ron, can you explain why you view climate risk as a fundamental financial risk?
So climate risk is really a big elephant in the room. until now, financial institutions have not taken it seriously, but it also highlights the physical nature of companies and the infrastructure they own and are exposed to. So if you were a company, let's say Brookfield, and you came to me, I was the Royal Bank, and said, lend me some money. I would say, well, I'll look at your financial statements, I'll look at your company, I'll measure how well you do with relative to competitors. And lo and behold, you're a wonderful company, I'll lend you money. What I don't know today is that you own 3 airports, say, on the sea in Britain. You own big houses and multi-family buildings in Malaysia that are being hit by cyclones. And. So the physical side of businesses has not been collected by banks until now. Now, with climate change, those climate events affect the physical. And so we're not measuring that on your balance sheet today. And hence, we're not pricing you properly. If I knew that you were right in the path of hurricanes and right where sea is going to rise and so on, I might not lend you the same amount of money.
It's a very compelling way to frame the urgency of integrating climate considerations into financial planning. And listeners, let's take a moment to really consider the personal side of what Ron just shared. I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in the big numbers and the global strategies, but at its core, managing climate risk is about safeguarding our future, both as individuals and as business owners. So think about questions like how does the idea of climate really risk affect your decisions today? And on this note, we really want to encourage everyone to think about, how the small business actions can you take to make a big impact in protecting our planet. But let's kind of delve into the regulatory landscape, Ron. I mean, businesses are navigating the complexities of a rapidly evolving regulatory environment, adjusting strategies to stay compliant and competitive. Now, with these regulators intensifying their focus on climate risk, how have you seen the landscape change in recent years?
So it's changed considerably. Many firms now are starting to measure their financial risk from climate change, and many more are required to do so this year. Approximately 100,000 firms worldwide will be affected. And there's nothing like regulators to get firms going. We're working, for example, with OSFI and AMF in Quebec to help them with data to supply to the people they're regulating in their next initiative. And that's getting us much closer to the regulatory world and getting the regulatory world much closer to what we call good data.
Mm-hmm.
That's the challenge for a lot of banks, and they are quite aware of it.
I mean, staying ahead of the regulatory changes is indeed crucial, especially for today's businesses. But the unpredictable nature of climate change is reshaping how we approach sustainability and environmental management across the globe. Ron, with your deep understanding of climate risks, what developments or events have surprised you the most?
So what I'm most surprised by is how accurate our predictions of today's events were back at the beginning of the century when I started in earnest. We actually knew what was going to happen as it's happening today. We knew that if we didn't get control of carbon and if it passed a certain level in the atmosphere, that we would be faced by ever increasing climate risks. So last year was the hottest year ever recorded on record. It was quite a shock to most people. And the actual level of it was a shock, but it wasn't such a shock if you would have really noted what people knew back then.
You're right. I mean, the ability to really anticipate and adapt to surprises is key in risk management. But how does Riskthinking.AI incorporate such unforeseen events into its models?
Well, it comes from the way in which we derive data on the future. You might ask the question, how do you get data on the future? It hasn't
Right.
happened. Like you can't go to a time series that you can buy from some data supplier. So you have to construct that data and derive it from what's in people's heads, what's the output of models, and so on. But here's an interesting point, that if you were to take a single model or any model, doesn't matter which, the best, the worst, doesn't matter which, and were to say, I'm going to work on that forecast, which is what a lot of people are doing today, that model is bound to be wrong. Why? Because there's no way you can forecast an event in 2050 that's so radically uncertain. Now, forecasting simply will not work. So what we do is take thousands of estimates from models, the predictions they've made, the experiments that have been done with them, from scientific papers, and we use climate science to weight those models. And when you do that, you suddenly get a picture of the future, which is not a number. It's a distribution of numbers. It's a range of numbers and certain likelihood of numbers occurring. And that is the key, one of our key products and unique products. There's no one, I think, in the world that yet has developed across the world for every point on the surface, for every risk factor that's possible, that kind of information. And
Right.
with that information, you immediately understand the exposure of any physical asset.
No, talking about a product, I mean, innovating with new products is quite key to staying competitive in today's fast-paced market. Um, could you tell us a bit more about your new product, which is Beyond Hindsight, and what makes it unique in the marketplace?
Well, up to now, if you wanted to get a report on your company, let's say Brookfield in this case, and you wanted to get a report, it was a complex and costly thing to do. In some cases, I've heard of stories in large banks of many, many millions being spent on consultants to do this. Smaller institutions might be hundreds of thousands. So we today have produced a report. It's about 42 pages long, detailed on any one of 80,000 companies worldwide. That includes all of the major companies in the G40 and in 2,100 indices. And we can produce that report and sell it at the bottom end of the scale for $10,000 a year. And that suddenly is revolutionary. We've taken the market and suddenly democratized it to a point where any company can afford it. And so that's what's gotten people really excited.
No, it is exciting. I mean, it sounds like Beyond Hindsight could be a game changer for proactive risk management. Now, before we wrap up, Ron, could you share one final piece of advice for our listeners on how they can start integrating climate risk into their business strategies today?
Well, I'm biased here, but I would say that a very simple thing to do would be to license Beyond Hindsight. It's not a large amount of money. For most people, it's a credit card transaction in a bank or an insurance company or whatever. The cost is low. It gives you a real picture of what's possible in the future and what you could look like if you had all of your ducks lined up. At the very best, that will lead to our more complex products like Velo, where you can experiment with many different companies, and our digital twin, which at this point Bloomberg is one of the users of that twin, Bloomberg the terminal. So that should also give you a bit of comfort, because Bloomberg is a real fantastic brand for data, and they don't take any old data, but they took ours.
No, it's quite inspiring to see how technology can really drive significant change. And for everyone tuning in today, please think about the technologies that you currently use in your business and think if there are any opportunities to innovate or leverage new tools to enhance your resilience against risks, especially those as critical as climate change. But thank you, Ron, for really emphasizing that innovation isn't just about keeping up, but it's really about leading the way to a safer tomorrow. Again, thank you for such an enlightening conversation.
Thanks a ton for this invitation. Really appreciate it.
All right, and that was the end of our discussion with Ron Dembo. From our conversation, it's quite clear that understanding and managing climate-related risk is not just prudent, but also imperative for the longevity and resilience of businesses. To our listeners, please remember the importance of staying informed and proactive in these unpredictable times. We'd like to extend our gratitude to our guests as well as to our partners, our exclusive banking partner, RBC, shipping partner, UPS, accounting software partner, Zero, email partner Constant Contact, and exclusive hospitality partner IAG. For more insights and resources, be sure to subscribe to the Canadian SME Small Business Magazine at canadiansme.ca. Join us next time for more enlightening discussions. Stay safe and empowered. Thank you.